Morning. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
What happened, for media, freak like Zelensky, who will die for an opportunity to speak in front of any audience, to cancel his plea to the congressman a few minutes before,
right,
without any official comment, is not just a disaster. It's a big question. Something should happen. It's an accident. What's behind it?
You have to read the tea leaves, look specifically at the news articles that are coming out in places like the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Economist, Newsweek. I learned years ago, right after I joined the CIA in 1985, and we were given all this information. We said, this is classified and, this must be protected. And then within a day or two, I've seen it on the front page of either the Washington Post or the New York Times. And so I quickly understood that one of the ways that policy is guided, directed, is through media leaks or stories that are planted in the media. And so what you've seen is a spate of stories that are, suggesting that Zelensky's not going to be long in his position.
So this whole media campaign has to be orchestrated.
Yes.
It's a message.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, this is not coincidence. This is not just somebody woke up one morning and said, I'm going to leak information about Zelensky. This is a coordinated plan now. I think the United States, candidly, has no idea how to get out of this mess. Because when they entered this entire war by proxy, they really did expect to defeat Russia. It was assumed that just this minimal amount of pressure would force Russia to break up. It would force Putin out. They genuinely believed that. They believed that the Russian economy was so weak that any amount of pressure from the West would cause a collapse. And that NATO, of course, was so big and so strong that no way could Russia withstand that. Well, now here we are 21 months into the special military operation. And Russia without full mobilization, Russia without going on a full war footing, has managed to effectively defeat NATO. The proxy of Ukraine, because if you go back and look at it, Ukraine represented the second largest army in NATO. It was not a member of NATO, but all the training that NATO had provided it over the years, it made it actually the second largest after the United States. It was larger than Turkey. And, they fully expected that Ukraine would prevail over Russia. Now that it hasn't, and the United States has been exposed that Patriot missile system really doesn't work. The HIMARS,
at least as expected.
Yeah. Well, and the HIMARS as well, that, remember that was going to be a game changer. Some people talked about that. And I at the time said, it's not going to be a game changer. Yeah, it's a new weapon on the battlefield and it's going to kill more civilians, but it's not going to change.
No Wunderwaffe.
Yeah, no Wunderwaffen. Exactly right. So now here we are with there is no viable plan forward. NATO does not have additional weapons that it can put on the battlefield that are going to change the course of event. And the one thing that NATO can't create are more Ukrainian soldiers. The losses that Ukraine has suffered are staggering. They're measurable. Ukraine is going out of its way to try to cover that up. But in this age of social media, one of the criteria I've used in trying to analyze what's going on is, I monitor Russian social media and I monitor Ukrainian social media. You see on Ukrainian social media the postings of fathers, mothers who have lost a son, girlfriends, wives who have lost a lover, a husband, and these endless pictures of flags in cemeteries, just innumerable. You don't see that on the Russian side. And that should tell you right away that despite the Western claims that Russia is suffering devastating casualties,
Far from reality.
Control that social media on this.
Yeah, that's very far from reality. That's not the case. How do you evaluate? What's your estimation of Ukrainian losses?
I'd say it's over 1.2 million total, killed and wounded, and not going to return to the battlefield. And again, this people forget. I do like to use comparisons with World War II. To go back and look at what the Soviets were able to do in spite, that first year of Operation Barbarossa, when, the Soviets suffered terrible losses. I mean, millions of men. And the Germans made the assumption, oh, well, the Russians are done. They can't recover from this. And what they didn't understand was that their plans for mobilization had already been put in place prior to that. There were bases for training that were east of the Ural Mountains that were not touchable by any bombers from the Nazis. Well, Ukraine doesn't have that now. Ukraine does not have a secure location where it can take new recruits to train them.
We do.
Yeah.
We do, and we still train, and we're far from whatever amount we have to put on the battlefield. Yeah. We're still not in a hurry. But we're not in, but that's our way to fight the war. No. We are never in a hurry.
Training, in anybody that's ever been through a military training course, the basic training is usually about 3 months. And in that 3-month time frame, you're just learning to get oriented to military life. Yeah. How, the command structure, who you need to listen to, what certain commands mean, maybe basic operation of a rifle. Some will get into, how to handle a pistol. Maybe something as simple as, or as complex as land navigation, how to work communicate. But it's all basic.
It takes time.
And then after that, how are you going to learn to drive a tank and then drive a tank within a brigade, within a formation, or to operate artillery, to sight in artillery?
So a couple of weeks in United Kingdom or in France or wherever doesn't help.
Yeah.
Doesn't help.
Yeah, so what Ukraine is doing is sending people off where they'll have enough knowledge to be cannon fodder.
Exactly.
They bring no military skill to the battlefield.
We started discussing this thing that is happening in media, that it's a message and that's planned and it's not a coincidence. But at the same time, high representative of American government are saying, no, we cannot afford loss of Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Minister of Finance is saying that, no, it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Biden is saying it's a disaster. Blinken is trying to say that, no, they're doing fine. Don't listen, they're doing fine. They're moving on the front line.
Yeah.
The Penguin Man, what's his name, Miller, who's a representative of White House, he looks like Penguin to me.
Yeah.
And the way he talks is just weird.
Matthew Miller, the State Department spokesman.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, from Batman movies.
Yeah.
He's a bit weird, should I say.
Yeah, you're right.
He cannot be that stupid. At least he presents himself as extremely stupid, but maybe that's his just job to look stupid. So if all those guys are pro-war and they want this war to be in Ukraine, who is fighting against?
Yeah.
Who is leaking all this info?
Well, in part, the United States needs the war in Ukraine to justify an $800, $900 billion defense budget. That's number one. There is no rational reason that the United States should now be treating Russia and talking about Russia as an enemy, and they are. I'm old enough. I grew up during the Cold War. I was born in the 50s. Remember the 60s and the 70s. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. During that entire time, when we were in competition and conflict with the Soviet Union, there were still lines of communication. Nixon would still talk to Brezhnev.
Sure.
There was still an element of mutual respect. That has disappeared, and it is now.
And that's extremely dangerous.
Oh, very dangerous because you look at the likes of particularly your foreign your foreign ministry crew, everyone like Sergei Lavrov. He's a giant, in my view. He's a giant in the world. He really is. He brings a measure of professionalism and calmness that's much needed. Compared to Tony Blinken, it's a joke. There is not. The United States at one point was able to promote diplomacy. Well, we'll talk. Doesn't mean we have to agree. I mean, everybody, you can, different countries, different interests. But what has troubled me is that the United States and Russia share so much in common. Or we used to share much in common. The rebirth of religion that's taken place in Russia, that even after the communist era tried to quash it and destroy it, the Russian Orthodox Church is as vibrant as it ever was. And that religious foundation should be a common bond with the United States, except in the United States now religion is under attack. We've had, we even had instances where the FBI was talking about surveilling Roman Catholics. And I'm thinking, that reminded me of the Soviet era when the KGB was going after the Russian Orthodox Church.
Well, I have to say that last years of the Soviet Union reminds me what's happening in the United States right now.
Yeah.
You have your own perestroika, man, and it won't end good.
Right. No, it is.
I'm not sure that will be United States in a couple of years. There can be just a whole bunch of different states, but no longer United States of America.
There's a definite fracturing. And that is frightening from the standpoint that,
of course, it is.
The agreement on what it meant to be an American, because now you're seeing arbitrary arrests of political opponents.
No, what they're doing with Trump is outrageous.
Exactly. What they're doing with Trump is it's criminal, and it is people involved with that are they're misusing the law. There are the special treatment.
Yeah, but those liberal Democrats, they basically hijacked America. But there is still a question. So who is fighting against them? Who planted all those articles? Who is trying to take United States out of Ukraine? I just can't see those political forces, because Washington Post and all others, they are pro-Democrats, basically medias.
This globalist movement, well, it's a combination of two things. The corruption that's endemic in Washington. We're good at lecturing other countries about they're corrupt, and we like to talk about in Russia the oligarchs, etc. But then look at the U.S. Congress. Look at the members of the U.S. Senate who had money invested in Ukraine. Whether we're talking Mitt Romney, a senator, whether you're talking Joe Biden in his days as vice president, you've got members of Congress that are not only profiting economically, they're becoming very wealthy. While in office, when their salaries, they shouldn't come out as millionaires, but they're coming out basically as oligarchs, is what they've become, and it's allowed. When I first moved to the Washington, D.C. area in 1979, starting work on a PhD program, there were no Lamborghini, Ferrari, Bentley, Rolls-Royce dealerships in the area, none at all. There are now. So this luxury lifestyle that used to be seen only on certain select streets in Hollywood or in London, are now it's all over Northern Virginia, and they don't produce anything there but selling access.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah.
What's happening with Zelensky? What's your prediction? What's his future?
I don't see how he survives to the end of the year. I know some are saying that he's going to be ousting Zaluzhny. Maybe he's got a power base I've not seen, but I always, when it comes to a military coup, I always put my money on the guys with the guns. And I'd say Zaluzhny has the guns. You've seen this split with lining up with Zaluzhny as Klitschko, the mayor of Kiev. Zelensky, it's his power base has been very much dependent upon this neo-Nazi movement. And, sometimes people bristle at that charge about calling them neo-Nazis, but, when you got the symbolism and you got the words, what else do you call it?
Sure.
You have to admit it for what it is. So I think we're seeing the definite erosion of Zelensky's power and ability to stay in office. And part of that's also being determined by the battlefield. What's taking place on the battlefield? Russia has not gone into winter camp. Russia continues to move methodically. It is, I guess, causing attrition among Ukrainian forces that they can't replace. And they're losing not just men, but they're losing equipment. And then to top it all off, the ultimate horror is they're bringing pregnant women and putting them in the trenches. This is, it's just like an abuse of nature.
The coup? Probably could be the coup.
Yeah. They're saying, oh, no, it won't be a coup. It'll be Maidan 3. And I go,
no.
Maidan 2 was a coup.
Sure.
This goes back to,
it looks like United States officials, they don't need Zelensky alive.
No.
They prefer to have him as a symbol.
Well, just look at the history of the United States in dealing with foreign leaders. And, the United States has had this Ukraine project going since the 1950s. So when they first tried to use it in the 50s to subvert the then Soviet Union. But look at Diem in Vietnam.
Look at
Saddam Hussein. I can show you the pictures of Saddam in a tuxedo with Donald Rumsfeld in a tuxedo, and they're all smiles and gripping and grinning together. Because at the time we were selling weapons to Iraq, at the same time that we were selling weapons to the so-called terrorist regime in Iran. And the United States was playing both sides back then as a way to try to weaken Russia or weaken the Soviet Union. So I said the United States game in this has always been very cynical. We've always tried to sell it at home domestically with terms about fighting for democracy and freedom, but it's had nothing to do with that. It's really been about economics, about money, about control of resources.
Yeah. What's going to happen on the front line? How long is it going to last?
I think that's up to Gerasimov and Shoigu. And depending upon the directions they get from President Putin. But again, Putin has, I think, deferred to the generals and allowing them to advance the strategy in a way that it minimizes casualties for the Russian side. The myth is being, the lies that are being told in the West suggesting that Russia is launching human wave attacks. That hasn't happened at all. The initial objectives that were set out, people didn't believe it when they said they were going to demilitarize Ukraine. But that's exactly what's happening. And what we mean by demilitarize is, one, you make their army incapable of replacing itself. Two, you destroy weapons that they cannot make and cannot replace. Three, and this was sort of, I think, I don't think Russia anticipated this, that in the destruction of Western military equipment, that it would expose NATO as being hollow, that it does not have the ability to resupply artillery shells, as an example, that the industrial capability that existed in the United States during World War II, when I can show you the tank production in the United States, tank production in Russia, they were the same.
Yeah.
So during World War II, the United States and Russia were producing the same kind of tanks, as an example, every month. The United States can't do that right now. It couldn't even it could not compete.
And we increased our tank manufacturing. We tripled it. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Larry. Unfortunately, the time is running out, but anytime you have it, just welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Вы слышали Ларри Джонса.